Okay. The students will continue with the ethics topics. In this, we will touch upon the third chapter, aptitude and foundational values for civil service. Here, we have dealt with the concept of aptitude in detail already. Here, two important things you have to keep in mind. Aptitude for civil service. We already have one examination by the very same name, CSAT, Civil Service Aptitude Test. So all the things mentioned in this topic, that is paper 2 of your preliminary examination, are pertinent to this concept. I have explained this concept in detail. I have dealt with different varieties of the things. I have compared aptitude with intelligence, ability, achievement, skills. So the next logical sequence is foundational values for civil services. This concept we have already dealt with. I'll brush through those things. Along with that, you should read this chapter along with ethical concerns and dilemmas in government and private institutions, code of ethics and code of conduct, which is there in 7th chapter, and this is in chapter number 6. Having said that, let's start. Foundational values for civil service. So this is the complete chapter which is mentioned in your syllabus. Moving forward, you should first understand the difference between civil service and public service. What do you understand by civil service and public service? Point number 1. Dear students, civil service and public service can be used interchangeably because UPSC and also second ARC have used the term interchangeably. That is point number 1. So whenever you get a question with respect to like any question with respect to civil service or public service, don't be in dilemma, don't be in confusion that I know about civil service, I don't know about public service, right? Until and unless they mention the things, you can use these terms interchangeably. Throughout the second ARC reports, they have used these things interchangeably. One indication like I would like to show is in chapter number 6, public service or civil service values. That is the name of the chapters. Means you see here, UPSC itself is having this concept. These can be used interchangeably, but there are some differences. Let us know what is this. So here, civil and public. What is the difference between civil and public? Is there any specific difference? Is these topics vary in kind or vary in degree? I mean to say, is this concept related or entirely different things? The answer is these are very much related. As I told you, until and unless they specify the things, you can use these terms interchangeably. Civil service, according to second ARC, refers to all the persons holding civil posts under union or state government. Right? Very simple definition. We do civil under union government. Civil means with respect to citizens. Then what exactly you mean by that? So this is one of the important definitions which you have to put in all your answers. If they directly ask you, like, what is civil service? Civil service comprises of all persons holding civil posts under union or the state. To elaborate and to add some more points, here civil excludes military and judicial service, right? So your military service and your judicial service is not civil service. That is one. Some in public administration, they also add police service, but it is not that pertinent here because we have civil service examination where IPS is there. So we can say like clearly, civil service doesn't include military and judicial service, right? Then what is this civil service exactly means? Civil service means these are the personnel who are holding civil post, but it excludes military, judicial, and even political office. Some authors go to the extent of adding even police service also, but it's not that appropriate. Civil service are professional, full-time, paid from the money voted by the parliament. How they get the money? They get money from the legislature. Union legislature in India is called parliament. So it is through that money they are skilled and career services. These are some of the things, some of the concepts we have discussed with respect to the topic of bureaucracy. If any of these things are missing, then it is not civil service, right? So for anything to be called a civil service, there should be professional. That should be full-time. That should be a career service. They should be paid from the money voted by the legislature. And it's a career service, having promotions based on merit or the duration of work. Right? Then coming to public service. Public service refers to, according to the draft public service bill, which we mentioned in foundational values. Public service means the all India services, the central services, and other services imposed in connection with the affairs of the union and states. Means it includes all India services, central services, and any other service imposed in connection with the union and state. This is the definition given by draft public service bill. Then there is an important difference here. With respect to public service, it includes all those things which were excluded in civil service. Means it includes the military, it includes the judicial and also political force. As in case of civil service, all the people who are working in civil service are paid out of the money voted from the parliament. And they provide public services. Here, this includes military, judicial, and political office. Right? So, in public service, we are including some of the things which are excluded in the civil service. Not only that, there is one important thing. Civil service refers to those which are directly related to policy formulation and execution. Policy formulation and execution. Say, for example, a nurse, a teacher who is paid by the government can be called public service, can be considered as a public servant, but they are not civil servants. Right? So in a way, you can say that those who are involved in policy formulation and execution constitute civil service. All government employees you can add it in public service. This is one of the difference when we come to public service and civil service, and there is no other difference. And as I told you, until and unless they ask for the difference, please use the time interchangeably, because UPSC and also second ARC have been using these terms interchangeably, right? 2019. What do you understand by the term public servant? Reflect on the expected role of the public servant. So in this regard, like what I have told, the definition of public service bill, draft public service bill, and other things you can add up. And some of the things I'll be explaining now, right? In all these things, major important thing which you shouldn't forget is public interest. How did we define civil service values? We defined civil service values from what people expect. What people expect means it is implying public interest. So whatever an individual does, he has to do with public interest. What should be the motto? What should be the goal? What should be the priority in public services? Public interest, right? Here, as we know, values, ethics, and code of conduct are related. This we have discussed already. I will just brush up the things. In 2016, there was a question. Discuss public service code. See here too. Second ARC mentions that as civil service code, but UPSC asked as public service code. Nowhere I have gone through the complete 15 ARC report. Nowhere second ARC mentions anything as civil service, public service code. It mentions only as civil service code. So they are also using the terms interchangeably. This we have discussed. Second ARC has recommended to enact civil service law, a law for civil service. In this, second ARC has proposed civil service code. Civil service code can be conceptualized, or it consists of 3 levels, in which at the apex is values, second is ethics, and third is code of conduct. Values and ethical standards that the civil servant should imbibe constitute foundational values of civil service values. These values should reflect public expectation from the civil servant with respect to political impartiality, maintenance of highest ethical standard, accountability for actions. At present, in India, we don't have prescribed civil service values. Very carefully you have to use. We don't have prescribed. These are the civil service values. Like that, we don't have prescribed thing. There are civil service values in the form of conviction and by other means. But as a prescription, we don't have. Second ARC says that foundation values should be given statutory backing. So how statutory means? There should be something ending with act or law in which these are present. Statutory backing means there is something which is done by legislature, which is done by the parliament. So by including the civil service values in civil service code, which is part of civil service law, second ARC is saying that this should be included. It should be given statutory backing. Code of ethics, as you know, this is the second level in the civil service code. It refers to broad principles which should govern the behavior of the civil servant. Two important things, broad principles, and they are guiding the behavior. In another place, they have also used the thing, guiding principles for good behavior and governance. This also can be used. Either of the one is correct. So, code of conduct is the guiding principles of good behavior and good governance. At present, in India, we don't have prescribed civil service. We don't have civil service ethics. code of ethics with respect to civil service. So second IRC says that you should have and you should be given statutory backing by including in the civil service law. Code of conduct, as you know, this is the third level, and these are precise, unambiguous list of acceptable and unacceptable behaviors and actions. As of now, Central Civil Service conduct rules. See, these are not having statutory backing. Rules means these are not made by law. These are made by the executive. Right? So they say that these are comprehensive, wide-ranging, but there are many shortcomings. There are many anomalies. So there is a need of rewriting these things, right? Foundational values for civil service according to second ARC. At the apex, you should have foundational values with respect to the following things, and these are the foundational values. Here, my dear students, often students and the lectures, often they make this commitment to the Constitution, they are not including. Clearly, in the second ARC report, what they have mentioned is, apart from commitment to the Constitution, they have mentioned these things. Means apart from means in addition to. So this is also one of the foundational values. So this is the same which is present in your syllabus. See, this is your syllabus. The only difference is they have added in your syllabus tolerance and compassion. This is an extension or an important appendage to empathy, which you will understand when I discuss the concept. So way back, like long before your syllabus was formed, second ARC has given some things. Those things have been taken by UPSC and they have put them as it is in the syllabus. See, this is your syllabus. The same color which I am showing you, they have the same things, right? We'll take up one by one. So commitment to the Constitution. What do you understand by commitment to the Constitution? Here comes the main important thing. Commitment to the Constitution is following the constitutional morality. Following the constitutional morality means following what is right, what is wrong according to the Constitution. See here, constitutional morality, don't confuse. Constitutional ethics, this is also good enough and it's right. According to Constitution, what is right and what is wrong? Mean to say that it refers to some of the standards and principles which are given by the Constitution. How to know about these standards and principles? Is by knowing some of the important things. What is the soul of Constitution? What is the philosophy of the Constitution? Who interpret the Constitution as to what is the thing? And what are the duties of the citizens? See, these are very important in your prelims. From these four things, like nearly like 1/10 of the question always come when it comes to polity, always. So what is the soul of the Constitution? Soul of the Constitution is your preamble. Objective resolution, which was drafted and presented by Jawaharlal Nehru, got a concrete form in our Constitution as a preamble. Preamble is a summary of the Constitution. Preamble is the soul of the Constitution. Preamble is a mirror. See, if you want to understand the meaning of the preamble, you can think that as a mirror. I gave you the example also. Preamble is like a mirror. Constitution is like a big elephant. So can't you see the elephant in the mirror, in a small mirror? In the same way, everything present, the cream, the soul, the crux of the Constitution is there in the preamble. Dear students, once again I reiterate and I tell you, please mug up the preamble today. It's very easy. It is one of the most important and fundamental thing which you have to do. If I have not done, it's a big blunder, in fact, right? Soul of the Constitution, we have to follow the principles enshrined in the preamble. Philosophy of the Constitution consists of fundamental rights and directive principles of state policy. Fundamental rights and directive principles of state policy constitute the philosophy of the Constitution. One of the major important thing in understanding these two concepts is this. Fundamental rights and directive principles of state policy form a whole. If we add these two, what we get is the whole. I mean to say that social life, political life, economic life are important aspects. In this, fundamental rights are majorly taking care of the political part. Your directive principles, the societal and the economic aspect. Only when we have got political, social, and economical empowerment, then only we can have these things in a complete whole. Then only we can have complete development of an individual. So, fundamental rights and directive principles are equally important. Fundamental rights and directive principles are equal as a concept. One is not above, one is not below. But fundamental rights are given backing by the law. They are justiciable. If there is a violation, you can go to the court. In case of directive principles of state policy, they are the directions as to how the state should be run. See, fundamental rights, more with respect to political things, it can be given equally to all. On the other hand, in society, we cannot have the social and economic things equally among all, or we cannot guarantee them. Are you getting me? Say, for example, if you go for, say, for example, economic equality. If you say that all individuals should get the same wages, it is said that society becomes like very, very recessive. Society goes in a very, very negative trajectory. Say, for example, a plumber or a daily wage worker, a manual worker, and also your Virat Kohli, your prime minister, your president, all will be given the same wages per day. Then who will work more? Scientist is also getting the same money, and the manual worker is also getting the same money. Society won't progress. Economic inequality are bound to exist in a society. So they have not been made justiciable. That is the only difference. Otherwise, both are very important for the holistic development of an individual. And very important thing, in Minerva Mill case 1980, Supreme Court said that Constitution is founded on the bedrock of the balance between fundamental rights and directive principles. This is a very, very important finding. Next, interpretation of the Constitution. When it comes to interpretation of the Constitution, whatever Supreme Court says is correct. Supreme Court is the ultimate interpreter of the Constitution. It has got original jurisdiction in interpretation of the Constitution. Say, for example, previously, Supreme Court said that preamble is not the part of Constitution. Afterwards, Supreme Court says that preamble is the part of Constitution. Why I'm mentioning this is, whatever Supreme Court says with respect to Constitution, that is final. Are you getting me? Hypothetically, I'm saying the worst cases. If Supreme Court tomorrow comes and says that Constitution doesn't give or doesn't tell anything about secularism, then we have to follow the same, even though it is mentioned. Why? Because according to the Constitution itself says that the final interpreter of the Constitution is Supreme Court. So that won't happen, right? So Supreme Court judgment, Supreme Court, how it interprets the Constitution, along with the duties which a citizen has to follow. So commitment to Constitution means you should abide by all these things, right? Commitment to Constitution. Next, constitutional morality. Please interpret and please understand the thing. What do you understand by ethics? Set of standards. See, as I told you, ethics and morality can be used interchangeably until and unless they ask you to differentiate. If they ask you to differentiate, ethics at the societal level, morality at the individual level. Individual set of standards, societal set of standards. Many, like more than 75% of the philosophers, they never distinguish these things. If that would have been the case, morality they have added to Constitution. How can that happen? Because morality, if you think this is an individual related thing, the whole concept becomes wrong, right? So constitutional morality means what are the standards and principles given by the Constitution is constitutional morality. What these standards and morals do, the principles do, they say what is right, what is wrong, what is just according to Constitution. Right? So what do you understand by constitutional morality? Constitutional morality refers to set of standards or principles mentioned or given by the Constitution, which indicate, which say what is right, what is wrong, what is just, what is unjust, what is good, what is bad. Right? Is this concept clear to you? See, just you already have explicitly, we have studied what is ethics, what are the standards, all these things. Now you have to carefully apply these things. Upholding the constitutional morality. Upholding the constitutional morality means following all these things. When you are a civil servant, I reiterate, when you are a civil servant, upholding constitutional morality means following all these principles along with your foundational values, code of ethics and code of conduct. And all these things, civil service values, ethics and code of conduct. That is constitutional morality for a civil servant. For general public, the four things which are there in black. 2019 question, what is meant by the term constitutional morality? How does one uphold constitutional morality? Hope the concept is clear to you. What, please give use your thinking. Just implement the concepts here. What is meant by the term constitutional morality? Yes, what do you understand by constitutional ethics? Constitutional ethics means set of standards, set of principles given by the Constitution. These are enshrined, these are reflected in the soul of the Constitution. That is your preamble, in the fundamental rights, directive principles, fundamental duties, and the interpretation given by the Supreme Court. Right? Upholding the constitutional morality means following all these things. Is it clear? So that is it. It's a very, very important thing. Many especially for this topic, there's no clarity if you go on such anywhere, right? So I reiterate once again, just internalize the thing. Constitutional ethics means some ethics. What does ethics mean? Ethics means set of standards or principles. Constitutional morality refers to set of standards or principles enshrined in the Constitution. Following those things is upholding the constitutional morality, right? Next is absolute integrity at all times. See here, very, very important thing which you have to keep in mind. We are discussing all these things with respect to civil service. So you should have a fair understanding of this term in general, and also you have to apply them to the civil service. Integrity. What do you understand by integrity? Integrity means following ethical standards. Integrity means following ethical standards on a continuous basis. This we have discussed in general. Today we'll discuss in detail. See here, the same thing they have mentioned in your UPSC syllabus. Complete. Whole or complete. Sorry. You often come across and you might be aware of whole numbers. 1.2, is it a whole number? No. 1, 2, 3, these are the whole numbers. Means these are the integers. So integer means whole or complete. When will a person be complete? Complete person when he follows ethical standards. In the sense of wholeness derived from qualities such as honesty and consistency of character can be considered as integrity. The shortest and best definition already we know. Following ethical standards on a consistent basis is integrity. Walk the talk. Whatever you say, you have to follow that. You have to do that. Say, for example, you have joined civil service. You have taken an oath that you will abide by the civil service ethics, civil service values, civil service code of conduct. So you have to follow. It means consistency of actions, values, methods, measures, principles, expectations, everything. So if you can have a formula kind of thing, integrity means honesty plus adherence to highest ethical standards or moral standards plus consistency minus hypocrisy. Hypocrisy means pretend to have qualities or beliefs or feelings that they do not really have. So you can say integrity is equal to honesty plus ethics or morals plus consistency minus hypocrisy. This we have discussed sufficiently. Integrity means uncorruptible. Man of integrity means is uncorruptible. Integrity means complete refusal to be compromised, whatever may be the inducement. So the same thing is reflected in your second ARC and also in your UPSC questions. According to second ARC, a civil servant, see this is with respect to civil servant. Civil servants should be solely guided by public interest in their official decision. So What is the ethical standard which has to be kept in mind for a civil servant? Public interest, as I already told you. So what is integrity for a civil servant? Integrity for a civil servant is public interest. Are you getting me? This is very, very important. Please internalize the thing. Any work a civil servant does, a public servant does, should be guided by the public interest. Public interest means something which is beneficial to the public, keeping public in mind, not the private interest. So we have learned the concept of integrity in general. Now we are talking about the things in particular to civil service according to second ARC. So according to second ARC, civil servant should be guided solely by public interest in their official decision making, and not by any financial or other considerations, either in respect of themselves, their families, or friends. This is the one which you have to reproduce in the examination. What do you understand by integrity in civil service? This is the one which you have to keep. See, this is one of the things which is lacking in most of the books. They are simply saying what is integrity in general. Integrity means following ethical standards, right? That is general true. What is ethics for a civil service servant? What is walk the talk for a civil servant? Civil servant has already, like, he has promised, he has given in writing that he will abide by the public interest. He is the servant of the people. Are you getting the point? So, integrity means following ethical standards. That is in general. But when it comes to civil servant, integrity means he has to do the work only with public interest. Please internalize this one. If the civil servant is doing any work with the intention, directly or indirectly, with personal favor or anything like that, then it is not integrity. When a civil servant, when a public servant is working in public interest, then we say that it is integrity. Right? According to Nolan Committee, this is one of the most important committee. In fact, all the ethical standards, public service values, which we discuss or which are taken care, which will be which are discussed in any form, all these things have come from the Nolan Committee. Nolan Committee, which was constituted in Britain to look into this aspect. According to Nolan Committee, the civil servant should not place themselves under any obligation outside individuals or organization. Should not place themselves under any obligation to outside individuals or organizations. So it is also saying the same thing. Say, for example, if I am an IAS officer, some industrialist, some contractor has gifted me something. You think that some X watch, ring, something like that. He has gifted. If I take that, I'll be in an obligation to do favor to him, right? So in an indirect way, right? So it says that holders of public service should not place themselves under any financial or other obligation to outside individuals or organizations that may influence them in the performance of their duties. So according to Nolan Committee, this is integrity. Is this clear to you? This is with respect to civil servant. I repeat again, holders of public office should not place themselves under any financial or other obligation to outside individuals or organizations that might influence them in performance of their official duties. Right? According to the Civil Service Code UK, second ASC has proposed Civil Service Code for India. Like that, in UK also there is a Civil Service Code, which they are already having that. In India, it's just proposed. Integrity is putting the obligations of public service above your personal interests. Integrity is putting the obligations of public service above your personal interests. Means you should give first importance to the public service. If there is two things which you have to do at the same time, one is related to public service and second is to public interest. You have to always choose public service, right? One is personal thing, another is public. So as a civil servant, you have to choose only public interest, public service as the top one. So integrity, I have just put all the important recommendation according to second ARC, according to Nolan Committee, and according to UK Code of Conduct. So in one, it is with respect to public interest, and in another say that you should not put yourself under any obligations. So they mean the same. So in both the cases, they are saying that ultimately public interest is the one which you have to take into consideration in all your work. Integrity, another important thing, dear students. UPSC questions are very, very important sources of information. I repeat, UPSC questions are very important source of information. Say, for example, in one year, they say that integrity means uncorruptible. Explain. So, according to the question paper setter, they are relating and they are equating integrity to uncorruptibleness. You have to take in the same way. In the previous year questions, UPSC says that integrity is uncorruptible. And integrity means complete refusal to be compromised, whatever may be the inducement. See this question. In 2015, one of the tests of integrity is complete refusal to be compromised. So like that, you have to take the important things from the questions also. Because as you are aware, ethics is a very subjective thing. Not only ethics, the whole social science is very subjective. UPSC questions and the syllabus give the framework for that. Explain with reference to the real life example. One of the tests of integrity is complete refusal to be compromised. Explain with reference to a real life example. Here you have to take the example where you or any individual have been induced, have been offered bribe, but they have not taken. Or there was a conflict of interest between public interest and the private interest, but the official has taken the public interest. Are you getting me? So in integrity, complete refusal to be compromised. Someone is giving 1 crore. You are not taking that. So you do give those kind of examples. Integrity without knowledge is weak and useless. Decentralized, very powerful. Integrity without knowledge is weak and useless. You have got integrity. You know the ethical standards, but you don't have the knowledge. You're a man of integrity, but you don't know the knowledge. Say, for example, with respect to law, you don't have the knowledge of the law. You don't have the knowledge of the profession. Take the example, 2 cases for this. You are a man of integrity, but you don't have knowledge. You are a doctor, but you are professionally not competent. You are not having the knowledge. So your integrity becomes weak and useless. Similarly, you are a good officer, but you don't know the knowledge. You don't know techniques and tactics as to solve how to solve the things. Then your integrity is weak and useless. Very, very important. Please internalize the concept. Next, but knowledge without integrity is dangerous and dreadful. The other case, the same doctor you take. You are a doctor. You have all the expertise. You're a doctor, you have got all the expertise, you have got all the know, everything. But you are not following integrity. You're a man who is corrupt. So you have a very good knowledge. You know how to remove the parts of the body and how to sell them, how to market them. Because you don't have integrity. Is this clear to you? Integrity without knowledge is weak and useless. You have to put this in your answers. This is a question in 2014. According to UPSC, this is the meaning. This is the crux of integrity. On the other hand, you have knowledge, but you are unethical. So what happens there? It will be very dangerous. Right? Some of first is little better when compared to this one. Right? What do you understand by this statement? Explain your stand with illustration from the modern context. So you can take this, you can take the example of a doctor, or you can take the example of any profession where there is integrity but no knowledge. What will happen? It will be almost useless. On the other hand, you have got knowledge but no integrity. No integrity means what? You're not following ethical standards. So it will be very dangerous, right? Next. In looking 2018, in looking for people to hire, you look for 3 qualities: integrity, intelligence, and energy. And if they do not have the first, the other 2 will kill you. This is according to Warren Buffett. So it's a very famous thing. Warren Buffett, I think you are all aware of Warren Buffett. Warren Buffett says that when you are hiring someone, you should hire people who are having integrity, who are having intelligence, who are having energy. Say, for example, you are hiring someone who is having integrity, who is having intelligence. See here, intelligence, like synonymously you can take as with knowledge, the same previous question, how it has come the other way. But no energy means you are taking one person who is 90 years of age. Won't be that good. At the same time, here, if they do not have the first, other 2 will kill you. The same thing what we have discussed. See, if you don't have integrity, if you are not honest, if you are not following the ethical principles and standards, your intelligence and the energy and intelligence of the person whom you hire will kill you, will be to the destruction of the company. Is it clear to you? Any doubt with respect to these things? These are things which you have to add in your answer. So similarly, you have to develop some of the things by adding permutation and combination with respect to the concept and some of the important topics. Right. Next is with respect to impartiality, foundational values, impartiality and non-partisanship. Impartial You often say that coach is doing some partiality. He's partial. Like long before, like Saina Nehwal, a great badminton player, Saina Nehwal, and PV Sindhu. Both were given coaching, were coached by one individual, the same individual. But after some time, Saina Nehwal felt that the coach is giving more importance to PV Sindhu. So she opted another coach. So here what? This is the example of impartiality. Say for example, now we say that BJP is, okay, let's not take BJP. We'll take like some group. Someone is favoring some party, some group, non-partisan. Partisan here means group. Here it is an individual, it is your self-concept, impartial. Non-partisan means not showing any favor to any party, any group, you can say. Impartiality and non-partisanship, acting solely on the merit of the case. So whenever there is a case produced to you, you should act solely on the merits and demerits of the case, and not with fear or favor. Very important. If you just write these two things, and if you elaborate this line, it will be more than sufficient. Right? What do you understand by impartiality and non-partisanship? They're almost like near in meaning, but not exactly. Acting solely on the merit is the key thing, without fear or favor. Any inducement, fear, or anything like that. As I told you, to differentiate the things and to make the things very clear to you, impartiality means it is impersonal, not carried away by personal qualities or compulsions, likes and dislikes. So what is impartiality? Not carried away by personal qualities or compulsions or likes and dislikes. So there was a teacher, in fact, madam was there. So like I don't want to take the school or anyway. So here she used to correct the papers. Say for example, Raghu, not favorite student. On the other hand, say for example, Gagan. Gagan is a very favorite student of madam. So well, madam used to correct, Gagan used to get sometimes like 125 and sometimes 150 marks out of 100. Sometimes Raghu used to get sometimes 15 or 100, not favorite student. Then madam used to see, Gagan has written very good answers, so I gave more marks. So she used to say like on all the questions, she used to put like -1, -2. So somehow at last she used to make like 95 or 98 out of 100. For Raghu, okay, this fellow already somehow he will fail. His parents are very poor. Okay. Somehow she used to add +1 of. At last, somehow reaching 35, 40 or 50 out of 100. This is partiality. If you are carried away by your personal qualities, likings and dislikings, say for example, you belong to some community, you belong to some gender. you are favoring that. Not only that, say for example, think that you belong to Muslim community. You feel that Jain people are very, very good. Hindus, not that good. Here, you have got liking for Jain people. Then it is partiality. Impartiality means impersonal. This is the crux. Means you should not be carried by your personal things, your personal likes and dislikes. It is a self point of view. Impartiality, acting solely on the merit of the thing should be there. Right? On the other hand, non-partisanship. Here, see, just understand the difference. One is from you, your likings, these things. And non-partisanship. Partisan means showing favorite to some party. Non-partisanship means no party. So, non-partisanship, here you are not aligning yourself with any party. Here you can say group. When you are in civil service, generally it refers to alignment with one party, some political party. Are you getting me? In general, non-partisanship means you should not align with any group. You should not align with any party. In the context of polity, in the context of public administration, it refers to political neutrality, not influenced by the political party or a group pressure or interest. This is other, you are aligning to other point of view. This also means acting according to the merit, right? Why should impartiality and non-partisanship be considered as a foundational value in public service, especially in the present socio-economic context? Illustrate your answer with examples. Impartiality and non-partisanship. Say, for example, there is a collector or there is an IPS officer. He is known for impartiality and non-partisanship. So he is known for impartiality and non-partisanship. Right? There is a festival, Ganesha festival. This IAS officer is from a community other than Hindu community, or he may be of anything. Say, think that he is from a Mohammedan community. He is known for impartiality and non-partisanship. During Ganesha festival, this IPS officer says, please don't go by this road. Don't go. The procession should not be carried down in this road. Instead, this may create law and order things. Please do take this route. If he is known for impartiality and non-partisanship, people will, to a greater extent, accept this. Otherwise, no, not possible. Right? And another important thing, impartiality and non-partisanship are very, very important and in fact are basic essence and also the fundamental minimal things. These are the basic minimal expected from a civil servant. Why? Civil servant is working in bureaucracy. Bureaucracy is ruled by rules and regulations. Bureaucracy is based on objective criteria. Bureaucracy is based on merit system. Right? So if you are in bureaucracy, if you are working with bureaucratic principles, means impartiality and non-partisanship is already there. Right? Why impartiality and non-partisanship? One of the reasons is civil service or public service affect every aspect of human life, from womb to tomb. Womb means like when you are not yet like come, when you have not yet come to this world, when you are in your mother's womb. Means civil service or public service is affecting people's life not from birth to death, even beyond that. Before birth, you are in the womb of the mother. It is affecting from them. Even after death, you'll be taken to graveyard. You'll be taken to the tomb. It will be affecting each and every aspect. Political parties, they stay for only 5 years. Civil service is permanent. So they should not align themselves to any political party. Civil servants are subject matter specialists. When it comes to subject matter specialty, you have to take the things based on impartiality, based on the merit of the case, not with your own set of values, likings, or by favoring to another group. And very, very important, and this is very important, my dear students, discretion. Though in bureaucracy, though a civil servant is bound to work according to rules and regulations, there are many circumstances where civil servants have a discretion. Say I give you the example. Ganesha festival procession. So here, IAS or IPS officer have the discretion to allow whatever they want, the way they want. It is in their discretion. That is one point. Another important thing, very important, as you proceed up in the hierarchy, they are more involved in policy making. As you come down, here you'll be having clerks, all these things. They're involved in some day-to-day regular activities. There is no much discretion. Say, for example, I'm a clerk at the base. My work is just to collect the bills. Say people come and they deposit 100 rupees. I'll give a certificate, a receipt for that. Here, discretion will be very, very less. In fact, zero. But as you go up, the discretion increases. Only if you are a person of impartiality and non-partisanship and a person of integrity, then only you can take the decision properly. Right? Two important things. Civil servants have vast discretion. If you are aligned to some party or if you are biased by some likings and dislikings, it will be very, very lethal to the society and the nation. And when it comes to discrimination within the organization, as you go up, when you are involved in things like policy making, law making, there is a lot of discretion. When you go down, there is little discretion. Right? In accordance with the Constitution, Civil Service Values, Code of Ethics, Code of Conduct. So, what should be the thing? Impartiality means acting on the merit of the case. Impartiality means in civil service, acting according to the Constitution, Civil Service Values, Code of Ethics, and Code of Conduct. Right? Okay. Next, the same thing is, civil servant is responsible for managing resources. Vast amount of resources will be under him. And also, he is the provider and delivers of services. Because of these things, he has to be impartial and non-partisan again. And at the same time, the community must trust him. Then only it will have confidence. If the community won't trust, like his work won't be appreciated, his work will be unethical. Next is with objectivity. Objectivity we have discussed already with respect to WEMA concept. Are your values, ethics, morals objective or subjective? What do you mean by objective? In civil service, what exactly is objectivity? Objectivity means you should make choices on merit alone. So, what is objectivity? According to Nolan Committee, you have to make choices. You have to take decisions based on the merit. See, don't get confused here. Objectivity, impartiality, non-partisanship, the basic crux foundation is the merit. So all revolve around the concept of merit. But in impartiality, that is with respect to not having your personal likings and disliking. In non-partisanship, you're not aligning with any political party or anything. Right? In the other way, telling these things in the other way, in case of objectivity, here you are taking the merit of the case. It is subject independent. It is according to the case which is present. So, should make choice according to merit, basing your advice and decisions on rigorous analysis of evidence. So, the second one, according to Civil Service Code UK, objectivity with respect to civil service is you are advising, you are taking decisions. These decisions should be based on analysis and evidence, not any other consideration. See, in impartiality, it says that you should not use your likings and dislikings. You should not use your liking and disliking. In non-partisanship, you should not align with any political party or any group. What is the implied meaning? Implied meaning of these two, it means the objectivity itself. In objectivity, they're not referring to these things, individual or group. They're directly referring to the object, the merit. Right? Associated with the idea of things like reality, truth, and reliability. Taking decisions objectively means taking decisions based on truth. These are associated with, these are the associated terms, reality, truth, objectivity, right? Based on facts, evidence, documents, data, and information. It is not based on individual consideration or any pressure, or it is not done to anyone's likings. Objectivity is mind independent. Objectivity is mind independent. It is with respect to the qualities which are present in the object. It is about the evidence. It is about the fact. It is about the data. It is about the information. It is fact dependent. So why objectivity? Same, like you can add this thing to your impartiality, non-partisanship also. Being objective, when you are basing your findings, when you are basing your suggestions on objective criteria, it increases transparency and also it increases accountability. If someone asks you, you can just give this thing. See, these are the facts, these are the procedures on which I have taken the decision. It avoids the conflict. Say, for example, there is a promotion. You are giving promotion to some subordinate, or you are rewarding something to your subordinate. You are giving a contract to some individual contractor. Then you can just say, see, these are the objective criteria. These are the merits of the things. So I have taken this. So by this, it avoids the conflict. To be fair to all employees. By this, employees will start believing in you. There is no partiality among the employees. Prevents complaints for your own good. So how for your own good? Because you are basing everything based on objective criteria. You are not taking decisions on your own likings or somebody's pressure. By this, complaints will be prevented. People start trusting you. It increases your confidence also. When you are doing something correctly, when you are telling truth, there is no need for you to remember anything. So when you are telling true, when you are talking truth always, there is no need for you to remember anything. You often might have heard, like CBI has called them for questioning. So what is that questioning? They will cross question. Because when they cross question, some or the other way, they will find the big difficulties. So one important takeaway. So you all youths, like you already, like many are about to marry, might have married. One of the important criteria or suggestion is that with respect to choosing your spouse, always before you confirm the things, in Western countries, they all do, like before they like get engaged in any marital relation or anything, they will be having concept like dating. So somehow in India, somehow it's not that feasible. You should talk to your spouse, your partner, at least for a few days on phone or any way. By that, you will come to know what that kind of person is. If he is telling anything wrong, he will be caught because he has to remember all the lies which he has told. If he is honest, there is no need for him to remember anything. By some or the other way, you will come to know what kind of person he is. See, here one important thing. All individuals are good. Please that. All individuals are good, but he may not be compatible to you. Is it clear to you? All individuals may be good, compatible to you. Know you they are compatible or not, you should speak. Otherwise, you'll repent in life. There are many, say for example, in any case, this is one of the things. At least you have to speak to them for at least 1 week, 10 days. If you know them from the past, then it's well and good. Okay. Next is dedication to public service. So it is impossible to serve in civil service without dedication. I'll tell a very important thing. So same thing, recommendation and here. Say for example, COVID-19. Can a civil servant, anyone, your IAS, IPS officer, all these people, can they work in this situation without dedication to public service? Can they work? It is impossible to work. Dear students, you may think that you are facing a lot of difficulties being at home, many things like that. I know many of IAS officers and IPS officers, MROs, Tahsildars, who work more than 14, 15 hours in this during these periods. Very important thing. See, I know for what all the students come to civil service. If public service was the only motto, there are thousands of ways to do public service. To serve the people, there are thousands of ways. But if you think that, if you think like with civil service, with IAS, IPS, you can enjoy the life, you are wrong. I repeat, if you think that you can have very good life, you can enjoy the life the way you want with IAS and IPS, these things, you're wrong. I'm very carefully using this term. You will be having power. You will be having money, lot of money. You will be having lot of power, lot of fame. See, my own classmates, my own students who are in service, they're having lakhs of followers. They're very popular, very powerful. But if you don't have the motto of dedication to public service, really, this is not the service for you. You'll be getting money, you'll be having power. Maybe it will be useful for your family members and friends, not for you. One of my friend was saying, like he was an IPS officer, he used to say, the whole district is under me. I can do whatever I want. Anything, hotel, gatel, everything is under me. The major thing is I won't be having time. Right? If you don't have dedication to public service, this is not the correct one. You'll be getting money, you'll be getting power, but you won't be happy. Why is that so? Why dedication is a very, very important and it's a foundational value. What exactly it means? Dedication means complete involvement in that. You have to dedicate your life. Means complete involvement. Is very dedicated in studies, means is completely involved. What is the key word for dedication? Means complete involvement. The willingness to give a lot of time and energy, a willingness to give lot of like maximum, lot of a better word will be maximum time and energy possible. Dedication means complete involvement and your willingness to give maximum time and energy. Dedication means to place public service above personal interest, hobbies, and preferences. What does this mean? Say, for example, we'll take one thing most popular and often cited example. You are a public servant, think that you are working in some like electricity board or something like that. Suddenly at say 7 p.m., you get a call. So there is a problem with respect to distribution of the power. Then you can't say that, no, 7 o'clock I have, my timetable is with respect to going for jogging, walking, I'll go for that. No. Your jogging, your hobbies, your interest, your preference are secondary. You have to just rush. A collector or an IPS officer cannot say that 6 to 7, I want to go for walking, I want to go for jogging. I have recently joined a course on guitar learning. I am practicing dance. No. You have to place public service above your personal interest, hobbies, and preference. See, the term public interest is very, very important. Public interest means whatever you are doing is to help the public, keeping public at the center, right? So in all these things, natural calamity, emergency services, land or problems, mega festivals, think it over. Can you do all these things without dedication to public service? Without you giving major preference to public interest or public service? Can you do all these things? No. So at this point, I would like to tell a case study also, a recent case study in UPSC examination. There was a natural calamity. Because of the natural calamity, roads were not good, many problems in transportation, communication, all these things. You are a civil servant. You, along with your team, you went to rescue the people who are struck in natural calamity. What these people do, many scold you and many even try to beat you. So you are demoralized. It says, sir, these people, they won't hesitate even to kill us. Let us stop this. We have come for helping them. We were late, in fact. It's not our fault. Because of heavy rain or anything like that, we are not able to reach in time. And also we are not having everything what these people are asking. That is not our fault. Why should we risk our life? In these situations, if you are not dedicated to public service, it is impossible to work. So you should have dedication, especially in this kind of things. You should have public service. Why dedication? A very, very important quote by Kennedy, John F. Kennedy. This you might have learned in your schooling. This was very conspicuous when we were students. Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do, what you can do for your country. Public service is a national call. Why we have to dedicate? Because public service is a national call. It doesn't matter whether the country has given something to you or not, but you have to give to your country. Why dedication? One of the things is, it is a national call. You are a citizen of the country. It is your duty to do this one. Another case, public service is more challenging, demanding, and very stressful. I repeat, public service is more challenging, demanding, and very stressful. In many cases, there will be budget cuts, inadequate staff, increased workload with high expectations from the public. Because of this, you should have a dedication. If you are not dedicated, you cannot work with insufficient budget, inadequate staff, increased workload, the changing circumstances. There will be a lot of pressures. You will be seeing only one side of the story. You won't be seeing the other side of the story. A SI may be powerful according to you, but he's in the hierarchy. Above him, there are officers. Same way, IAS officer, for him also pressure. IPS officer is also in the hierarchy. Many of my friends who are there in IPS, they say that they won't get leave. They won't get leave. In this corona time, no one got leave, whatever may be the circumstance. So there is an element of dedication needed. Not only that, as you are aware, you should be politically neutral, and public service works go unrecognized publicly, even unrewarded professionally. There are many cases. Say, for example, if some IAS IPS officer does very good work. Who will take the credit? The government will take the credit. At the same time, IAS officer or your IPS officer is just the implementer of the policy. So whatever they do, it is not recognized. Sometimes it won't be rewarded also. Say, for example, the career system of promotions in India as of now, it is largely based on seniority, not how you complete the things. Another very important thing is serving others provide a great joy. Civil servant is very fortunate and is paid for this. This is very important thing. Serving others provides a great joy. You try it, helping others. Say, for example, you have given some notes to someone individual, or you have given some money for some individual. He says, sir, because of you, I could clear the examination. I am indebted to you throughout my life. Please, call me anytime. I'll be at your service. You can see the joy in their faces to whom you have helped. Even now, people, they think that collector, with a paternalistic attitude, whatever they have, they face the problem, they will go to collector. Why? Because they trust that person. And when you solve this, there is a great joy. Not only that, here, say, collectors, even British time, many of the British collectors, when there was attack from wild animals like tiger, all these things, they used to go and hunt those animals. They used to save the people. There's a great joy in these things. How can I develop dedication? How to develop dedication? Think it out. How can you, in all these cases, you have to think it. And also you have to add upon your points. See, I have gathered, I have studied. After that, I have come to these things. Social science, this is not the end of the thing. I'll make the concept clear to you. You add upon the things based on the things what I give. How can you develop dedication? The spirit to serve and sacrifice is the essential ingredient of dedication. Until unless you have the spirit of sacrifice, spirit of service and sacrifice, you won't be dedicated. Why will you dedicate? So you have to imbibe in the individuals, especially the civil servants, if they want to be dedicated. So imbibe them with the spirit of service and sacrifice. Public officials should feel that they are working for the national cause. They're working for the nation. They're the citizens of the country. It is their work. It is their duty. It is their responsibility. Then only they will do that. Otherwise, possible. These are very, very important. So how to develop dedication? Dedication with respect to two important things needed to develop. That is the spirit of service and sacrifice. Next is public officials should feel that they are working for national cause. That is their duty. That is their call. That is the way of showing patriotism. Next is empathy towards weaker section. So here, why weaker sections? What do you understand by the weaker section? In general, dear students, same thing, empathy towards weaker section. Here they have added in your syllabus tolerance and compassion towards the weaker sections. Weaker sections. Who are the weaker sections? See, these are the weaker sections. Women and children, SC, ST, OBC, victims of atrocity, natural calamity, old age, differently abled, mentally challenged. And once again, among this also you have to take women and children. Are you getting me? This is one way of increasing your choices and also decision making. So SC women, ST women, OBC children. So in all these cases, once again, here women and children are the weaker sections of the society. Women and children, SC, ST, other backward classes, victims of atrocity, natural calamity, old age, differently abled, mentally challenged. You can add any other things. Empathy. What is empathy? Empathy is just understanding how others are feeling from their own point of view. Putting yourself in other shoes is the best word. So step into the shoes of others. Step into the shoes of others. Say, for example, there is a person who is not having one leg. So this person is having only one leg. He is not having the other leg. In this context, what is empathy? Here, let me explain you with other two related concepts, that is sympathy. Next is empathy. Next is compassion. Sympathy means just pity. Oh, this person is not having legs. How unfortunate. How bad. I pity this person. This is sympathy. Empathy. What are the problems this person will be facing? What are the problems this person will be facing? See, if I don't have one leg, what will be the thing? What will be in the positions? Or to make the things clear, think that he's not having both the legs. You put yourself in his shoes. You put yourself in his place and think. Putting yourself in his place and thinking is empathy. Compassion means doing something to ameliorate the difficulties faced by the individual. So providing some vehicle or some walking stick or some instrument so that this person artificial limbs. That is compassion. Are you getting me? See, here, very important thing is sympathy. So it is about pity. It is about feeling. Empathy, you are feeling and also you are understanding the things. Understanding the things means knowledge. Compassion, you are feeling, you are understanding the things, and also you are doing some work, action. So can you relate all these things to our ABC components? Affect, behavior, and cognition. In sympathy, there is feelings, means only affect component. In empathy, there is feeling and also knowledge component. Means A and C are present. Cognitive thing. In compassion, all the things A, B, and C, behavioral part is also there. Right? So in empathy, this becomes very, very important. Say, for example, there are floods in China, you think. Now floods. You put yourself in that position. Say, for example, due to corona, both the parents have died. The child is just 10 years. You put yourself in his shoes. This empathy. Because when you put yourself in that situation, then only you will understand. Say, for example, there is a victim of sexual abuse. You put yourself in that shoe, in her shoes, in that individual's shoes. Then only you will understand the thing. Otherwise, you'll come up with all the excuses that this clothes, those things, attitude. No, you put yourself in that position. How critical it will be, how society thinks, what people think, what will be your future. So putting yourself in other shoes is empathy. This is very, very important. Until and unless you know how others feel, why others feel, you cannot solve their problem. So you cannot be compassionate correctly. Can you be compassionate without understanding their problem? No. The best way to understand their problem is put yourself in their shoes. Look at the world through the eyes of others. It also like the same phrase. Look at the world from the lenses of others. Understand and experience others' point of view, feelings, problems, and aspirations. Understand, say for example, transgender people, any other weaker sections. You understand, experience others' point of view, feelings, problems, and aspirations. Empathy involves both affective and cognitive components. So I have already told you how. Affective feelings that are associated with the person. Cognitive understanding what other persons feels and why. Why empathy? Why you have to be empathetic? Because you are dealing with people. You are a civil servant. So you should understand what their needs are. You should understand what they want. Then only you can satisfy them. If you are not empathetic, you won't be knowing what they want. Say, for example, now think that you are coming up with a scheme where you are giving 100, like, okay, 10 kg rice. But think that people want kerosene. So they are already having rice, but they are not having kerosene. If you are not empathetic, if you are putting yourself in their shoes, you won't be understanding this problem. It was a famous example often quoted in some of the case studies. In some of the tribal areas, all pregnant women and lactating women, they were given boiled eggs so that it is one of the complete protein. Somehow after that they found that all these eggs were there in dustbin, or somehow they were not eating those things because they felt that if they eat this boiled egg, their children will be balded without hairs. You can understand only when you put yourself in their position. You're dealing with people, so you have to be empathetic. You should be responsive to the people. You should cater to the choice of the people. You should be responsive. You can be responsible to the people only when you know what they want. To be efficient and effective helps to develop tolerance and compassion. So when you are empathetic, when you know others' point of view, when you understand their problems from their perspective, say for example, Mujahideen, we are all afraid of death, right? We're all afraid of death. But why are Mujahideen, like, see, the most developed, the most powerful nations, they have failed. America as a failed attempt for 20 years. They couldn't do anything significant in Afghanistan. In fact, they say that Afghanistan is one of the few places or only place where nobody till date has dominated completely. Before that, Russia could not. Why? Here, see, America, today, American forces, if they're killing 100, tomorrow they will be coming 200 people. So even if you kill 200 people, 300 next day. So they are fed up with these people. You should understand why they are coming, what they are doing. Then only. Okay, I was reading some message. Okay, right. If you are empathetic, then only you can be tolerant and compassionate. And what is compassion? Compassion involves A, B, C components: affective, cognitive, and behavioral component. Affective, that is feeling; cognition, that is knowledge, understanding what other people is feeling and why; behavior, commitment to do something about it or ameliorate the distress. You're doing something to overcome the difficulty. Can be compassionate only when you are empathetic. How can you be empathetic? You can be empathetic by putting yourself in other shoes. Compassion is equal to empathy plus commitment. Commitment for what? To ameliorate the distress, to solve the problem. Right? I think the concept is clear to you. Compassion for weaker section in distressed condition. Why? Why there is the compassion? Why compassion? The thing is, there is an element of helplessness. Why you have to be compassionate? You have to be compassionate because there is an element of helplessness thing. Victims of atrocity, or here as mentioned in the syllabus, compassion towards the weaker section. So they are helpless. They cannot solve their problem on their own. So you have to be compassionate. And it is a duty civil servant, the servant of the people. So you have to be passionate. Vast majority are ignorant and illiterate. So to solve their problems, you have to be compassionate. Compassionate means you are solving their problems. Serving others provide a great joy. So for all these reasons, you have to be compassionate. Then what is tolerance? Say for example, our day-to-day things. There is one individual. He eats only vegetarian food. He eats only vegetarian food. If he thinks that it is inhuman, it is uncivilized to eat non-vegetarian food. There is among the non-vegetarian people, there is some who eat cockroaches, yes, who eat snakes. Some feel these are like uncivilized. These people who eat cockroach and snakes, they think those people who eat, say for example, pig, they think that this is bad. Those who eat pig, they think that eating, say, cow is bad. Those who eat cow, they feel that eating horse is bad. Those who eat horse, they may think that people who eat camel are uncivilized, bad. So in all these cases, if you develop intolerance, what will be the state of the society? So how to define tolerance? Tolerance, the easy way, the most authentic way is tolerance means harmony in difference. Harmony in difference. If you are not tolerant, vegetarian fellow vegetarian eating people will be hating non-vegetarians. Among the non-vegetarians, those who eat cockroaches, they may be hating those who eat pig. Those who eat pig, they may be hating people who eat cow. Those who eat cow, they may be hating people who eat horses. Those who eat horses may be hating those who eat camel. And it goes on. In a diverse society, tolerance is very, very important. Once again, one of the basic thing for tolerance is when you have empathy. When you are empathy, when you understand others, when you put yourself in their shoes, you can have tolerance to a greater extent. Let me explain these things in a systematic way with the concept of ethnocentrism. Ethnocentrism is a concept, very important concept, evaluating our culture based on our own cultural values and standards. So, in ethnocentrism, you are evaluating everything based on the standards of your culture. So, when you evaluate, say for example, in my community, I'm vegetarian. So, if you evaluate based on this standard, all will be wrong. Okay, so ethnocentrism, a very important concept. It means evaluating other culture based on our own culture, values, and standards of one's own cultures. Here, you believe that your own culture is superior. So, what is happening in ethnocentrism? Ethnocentrism is a bad concept because you are evaluating everything based on what you think is right. Say, for example, I am a tribal man. I wear only dhoti. I feel that all people who wear pant, shirt, all these things are not correct, not good. That is ethnocentrism. Say, I'm a person who thinks that all should wear traditional dresses. So I wear sari, I wear lungi, all these things. If someone wears like modern dress, if I say they are wrong, then that is ethnocentrism. Ethnocentrism is evaluating other things, other culture, other peoples based on your standards, based on what you think is correct. Is it clear to you? Ethnocentrism. The opposite of ethnocentrism is cultural relativism. Cultural relativism is to understand the cultural practices of other groups in its own cultural context. So it is in their own cultural context. Say, for example, Americans. American feels that child marriage is a very, very bad thing. Child marriage is a very, very bad thing which is practiced in many of the developing countries. At the same time, Americans won't feel the same negative attitude, won't be having the same negative attitude for the teenagers for dating or before one gets married, they will be having series of dates. They will be dating many people. After dating, somehow fix, okay, this is the correct match. Then they will marry. This is ethnocentrism. This is ethnocentrism. See, you are evaluating child marriage as negative. Okay. But at the same time, you are not evaluating or you are not having the same negative attitude towards the people in your society, the teenagers, or the others having premarital sex in other forms like dating, all these things. That is ethnocentrism. On the other hand, cultural relativism refers to, say, for example, there is a tribal man. He feels that if there is something like fever or cold, cough, he thinks that this is because of some magic, some witchcraft, or some spirits have made the things. Right? You have to understand this in your own context, in their own context. Then only you will understand. For there are many other ways, right? So cultural relativism means you are understanding a culture in its own context. Why tribes feel like that? Why an individual does like that, right? Tolerance. It is harmony in difference. What is tolerance? Tolerance is harmony in difference. It is respect, acceptance, and appreciation of diversity. Very precise definitions. What is tolerance? Tolerance is harmony in difference. Tolerance is respect, acceptance, and appreciation for diversity. Tolerance is what makes us humans. We are not animals. Why tolerance? Because India is a land of diversity with subcontinental proportions. India is the only country where you will find all kinds of races. You can find Negroidic element, you can find Mongoloid element, you can find Australoid element. There are thousands of languages. All the major religions are present here. So tolerance is very much needed. To have unity in diversity, you should have tolerance. Each individual or culture is unique. Each individual or culture is unique. Unique means one of its kind. Not only individual, everything in this world is unique. We are all made up of tissues. Tissues are made up of cells. All the atoms, all the materials are made up of atoms. Once again, if you go in depth, you'll be having electrons. Even these electrons which are revolving around this atom, they are not identical. They're not identical. They revolve in different direction. Their spinning is different. So nothing in this world is identical. They are unique. There is diversity. There is variety. When every culture, every individual is unique, it means that there is always variety. There is always diversity. There is a lot of bloodshed happening because there is no tolerance with respect to any religion, with respect to an individual, with respect to family, all these things. Tolerance allows individuality and diversity while promoting peace and a civil society. And you as a civil servant has to be tolerant. Say, for example, you might have been from a well-educated family, well-educated background. You may be from some religion, you may be from some caste. If you are tolerant, it becomes very, very difficult. Not only for the people, for you also. It will be very disgusting for you. Say, for example, you belong to some community or some religion and you are put into a state where all the people who are present are entirely different. They are not from your religion. So will you be able to work properly? Not possible. How tolerance? How to develop tolerance? How to develop tolerance? By knowledge. So the more ignorant you are, the more intolerant you will be. So you should have sufficient knowledge. You should have openness. In case of knowledge, the major component is how you will get the knowledge? By being empathetic. By being empathetic. By being open. By being liberal. By communicating what you feel. By exchanging of the ideas. And also by freedom of thought, conscience, and beliefs. So you can add one of the important things is being empathetic. Very important. So by knowledge, by openness, by communicating things, by freedom of thought, conscience, and belief, you can have tolerance, right? By respecting others, by respecting the diversity, by appreciating the diversity, you can have tolerance. To what extent tolerance? To what extent it should be tolerance? This is in the context of two concepts which I have already explained you. Ethnocentrism into cultural relativism. So we have to understand a culture from based on the standards of that culture itself, standards of that society itself. We should have tolerance. To what extent? Should we be tolerant? Say, for example, there is a community where they are practicing female infanticide. Means if small like girl baby is born, they are killing. There is a society which is practicing untouchability. Can we allow these things in the name of cultural relativism? No. You should not be tolerant for those things where there is injustice, where there is violation of human rights, and where the things are not based on rational, based on reason, right? You should be tolerant only when these things are not present. When these things are present, there is no need for you to be tolerant. You should act in a way which provides justice, which upholds human rights. Your thought and your action should be based on rational thinking. Right? So you should not be tolerant for these things. Then 2018, they have given a question. Anger and intolerance are the enemies of correct understanding. Mahatma Gandhi. Anger and intolerance are the enemies of correct understanding. Mahatma Gandhi. So from among the things what I have explained, please take this homework and come up with the answer tomorrow. Right? How anger and intolerance in this, just don't go for any other thing. Just add all the things what I have provided and come up with your own answer. Just think it on your own. Anger and intolerance are the enemies of correct understanding. Right? Okay. So these are some of the important things.